Yoke van Dam, it is such a pleasure to have you here on the League of Visionaries podcast. And I think the best place to start is just to ask you, who is Yoke van Dam?
Marie, I've been wanting to be on this podcast for a while. I've been very jealous observing others, and I've been called the Kintsugi Queen. And the Kintsugi Queen is really a trademark that I got about 2 years ago, and it stands for I work with formerly fractured teams. And I don't know if you know about that Japanese art form where it's literally this broken pottery pot and they put it back together using gold. So the work I've been loving doing is really working with teams that are out of alignment, but also I found even on the coaching side and working with leaders that a lot of people struggle with perfection, and they struggle with that moment where they think that everything's not perfect, and if they've made a mistake, they want to hide it from the world. Where what I am preaching is through your greatest failures, your inner beauty will actually come out, and that's where the greatest learnings lie. And that is the Kintsugi method that I work with teams to really realign them, but also for leaders to actually uncover those hidden gems and learnings through the fractures.
That analogy of kintsugi is so stirring for me, specifically because there's something else that happens when that crack is repaired with gold, and that is it goes from being an ordinary everyday vessel to where it is now so much more valuable. And that is exactly what your work does as well through this process of mending and the gold that actually would not have been necessary if there hasn't been that problem, that crack, or what you would call team misalignment. Can you tell us a bit more about the team misalignment, how it happens, and what you do about it?
Yeah, I've actually noticed quite a few years ago, I was called in for the first time to do this kind of work. And this team specifically was struggling with toxic behavior. So the HR manager was saying they were a very important team. They were like high end in the pharmaceutical industry, and they were making decisions around what medicine gets prescribed for a certain illness. And yet they were in total misalignment, so gossiping, backstabbing. They didn't feel psychologically safe to bring issues across. So we started off with like a 2-day team transformation where it was all about rebuilding trust, but also getting them to speak up for the first time. And then when they started feeling safe, the gloves came out and they almost started fighting, which was uncomfortable but good in a way for the first time, actually speaking about what was really troubling them. So then we had to go to the place to say, like, it's good that you're speaking, but you still need to be respectful with each other and apply emotional intelligence. So a lot of coaching journeys and things like that came out of it because ultimately people actually have to take responsibility for what's in their own control. You know, change is not like a magic wand. You don't go in and do a 2-day process and kaboom, everyone is changed. It takes a lot of inner work, and as you know, in the leadership journeys that you're involved in, it sometimes takes quite a long process and a journey to actually get there.
Absolutely. It sounds like this developed in response then to problems that people were having. Because we often see coaches, facilitators, even speakers start out on their journey and they have this like, this is my expertise, team building, and that's the generic thing. But then as you go and do the work, sometimes it's out of a problem that this new idea unfolds. And it sounds like that's very much guided your Kintsugi method philosophy.
Yeah, I actually noticed while I was still working in corporate, I started noticing the toxic dramas. At one company, the toxicity was very apparent. So the CEO would literally yell at the people, and people were resigning all of the time, and everyone knew like this is a very toxic environment. And I kind of like stuck it out, but I realized that I needed NLP coaching on myself to actually protect my mental state to cope in that environment. How sad is that though? And then working in other environments where they would do purpose work, culture work, and they would say, oh, our company is so amazing, these are our values. And then when I looked out over the room of the people that were in the environment, I wasn't seeing those values lived out, and I wasn't seeing it in the managers. So for me, it was almost like a big value clash where it was like, how can I, working at this company, training these employees, say this is our culture, this is how we work, and then the salespeople that I was training at the time come to me and say, but you lied to us. This is not what's happening. And eventually there was just this disconnect. So in a strange way, I was forcibly removed from that company. And sometimes it's a blessing in disguise. So I was actually retrenched when they retrenched 2/3 of the sales team, including the sales trainers. And my very new husband said to me, Yoke, perhaps you should now go and open your business. Now is the time. There's never going to be a good enough time. Just do it. So I think like what you're saying about finding the problems in the work environment, I'd actually seen it for so many years in the environments I was in, and I was offering different departments would fight, and they'll say, can you do an intervention? Can you do a mediation between these two people? It's sales and corporate governance and accounts. They all hate each other. So I actually saw it was things that I was used for, but while working at a company. So when I went out, I was like, there must be other companies struggling with this too.
You're right.
So I think that was quite helpful, being in the real world environment where if you very much stuck in your own little world and you don't really know what's happening in companies, it's helpful to maybe notice needs while you are there.
That's a really good tip. We hear of a lot of people who are thinking of starting their own business. They're not quite ready. And those of us who have started a business can definitely say, keep the security while you have it and learn everything you can, make everything of it. But keep your eyes open, build your skills, and start to see what are the patterns and what are the things that you can later offer when you step out on your own. That's really sound advice, and it's good that you could do that with the support of your husband. Having that family support, home support, our own fan club is so incredibly important. But Yoke, I want to get back to when the gloves came off. I'm fan conflict. Traditionally, it's something I would run a mile to avoid, to the point that my way of dealing with conflict, definitely my default is to avoid it. And with time, I have come to see that actually the fact that there is no conflict is not necessarily healthy. On the other hand, I had this idea of the big bad wolf of conflict, and that it was something bad that I wanted to avoid. What I didn't realize is that in between there lies something, and that sounds like a something that's included in your Kintsugi method. That is a very kind of helpful, constructive, collaborative, even loving conflict, because we now can talk about things. We don't have to take the gloves off. It's not a fight. It's really about managing the conflict in a way that everybody's needs are expressed, and yet there's still respect and the outcome is better. It's like your Kintsugi object that is now richer and stronger and better. Can you tell us a bit about that dynamic and
Definitely.
conflict that works?
Yeah, I'm often working with leaders, and they very often are avoiding accountability. And that sometimes they don't want to sound like the bad manager that is calling out their team. So I'm finding a mix of different types of managers. So the one is, I don't trust my team at all. I'm a micromanager. I need to be reminded that you're in the office. I need to see you. Or if you're not there, I'm going to phone you every day or ask you to report on specific things, because inherently I don't trust that people actually want to work hard. On the other hand, we're finding that a lot of managers don't want to be seen as the micromanager, but then they are too hands off. They're not managing at all. And I've recently been kind of frustrated where I get called in to work with a salesperson that's going through almost like a performance process. So I need to show outcomes. I need to help them further. But what I'm noticing is the managers are not actually giving the feedback and supporting the person in the way that they need to. So whether it's actually reinforcing good behaviors, calling things out that's going wrong, but it doesn't help that you're actually sending an email to the coach, the external person, but never having a conversation with your own employee. And then when I ask this person, has this been discussed? They say, no, this is the first time I'm hearing about it. I'm like, how can you expect your teams to know that they are not performing in the way that they need to if you don't tell them? If they don't know what good looks like, and if they don't know what the boundary is. So Marie, often what happens that I call out in my sessions is a thing called stonewalling. Stonewalling comes through Dr. John Gottman's work. I love his work. So he did research with married couples, actually looking at interviewing these people, and then for many years later, he was accurately able to predict who would be having a divorce. And if they had, they call it the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. If they had those 4 behaviors, there was a very high chance of the marriage not working out. And when you pull that into the business context, one of it is stonewalling, is where you're upset about something, but instead of talking about it, you just go quiet. So in Afrikaans, they say stilstype. And that's where instead of saying to the person, I'm upset, this was my expectation, can you please change it? Whether it's your marriage partner, your friend, your colleague, your staff member. There's one legal team I did work with quite a few years ago. I was in Joburg, Cape Town, and Durban with their legal teams, corporate legal teams. And I asked them, who of you avoid conflict and do this stonewalling where you just go quiet? And like 90% of them raise their hand. And what happens if you do that, it actually breaks down trust. It breaks down the relationship because the person doesn't know how they can actually improve it. And they said they had a manager who literally stonewalled them for a month. So he was at work, but he wouldn't tell them what they did wrong. It was like this emotional manipulation thing. So I don't think that's what you do. I've also had to work through conflict avoidance. I got accredited on the Enneagram 5 lenses, and one of my top styles is number 9, which is harmony, which says that I like mediating, helping resolve conflict, and I try to not rock the boat and have a lot of conflict. But my second style, which is number 8, which is very assertive, driven, that is more like saying to people what I want. So I do both. I can say to people, this is what I want, these are the expectations, let's get it done. But I still try to not rock the boat and do it in a bad way. But I do know that sometimes you actually need to force yourself and think for the value of this relationship. You need to have a meeting and talk about it. So I once had to actually contact one of my clients. So, as a speaker, trainer, consultant, I had this retainer with the clients, and they kept on messing me around. So they were literally on the day that I was delivering, and I had to drive very far to them. So all the prep would be done, all the workbooks would be done, it's all booked out. And they would literally phone me as I'm like driving towards them that they would want to cancel it. And I had my terms and conditions in my contract, but because of the business continuation and the cash flow needs and the relationship, I didn't want to rock the boat. And eventually I started developing a sense of resentment. So actually I had to say to the manager that we need to have a meeting, and we met outside of his office, and I called it an alignment meeting, and I explained both sides, and I explained what are the ramifications on my business if I've booked out a specific day for them and then they cancel. It's actually lost opportunity. So even though I'm still doing the work for them, I could have done other work for clients, which I said no to. After that, they were actually willing to pay cancellation fees and things like that because they realize that it has to be a win-win for both parties. So I think, like, for me, what I teach my clients is sometimes you need to draw the line in the sand. It's about having that alignment, saying what is important for you, negotiating for the win-win, saying we're willing to compromise in this way, but what are you going to do? So not always just overcompensating completely from your side, because then you actually go into the rescue mode where you start resenting because you are no longer winning yourself.
Now, I love this story because it tells me that you, as they say in the tech world, eat your own dog food, right? You walk the talk. It would be no value to say that, well, this is the service I offer, resolving conflict and not resolving your own conflicts. And I think you did that beautifully by making sure that the alignment meeting happens in a third space. It's not your place, it's not my place. So nobody has the home field advantage. It's very, very neutral. I think that models this whole approach very, very well. But you mentioned something in there about getting messed around by people, and it's something I'm hearing way too much at the moment. So many people are just unresponsive. They are ghosting, they are disappearing, they're not communicating. And then when we do catch up with them, it's because very often they're in some kind of a crisis. Now, I don't know if this used to happen before we had this intensity and availability of technology and all these things that seem to make everybody think that they're busy 24/7. But it does seem to be increasing. It does seem to be extremely acute at the moment, and the ramifications are massive in terms of people's mental health. But that links to a topic you've been speaking about that is definitely on the uptrend. It's getting a lot of attention in especially workplace circles at the moment, and that is the Banny concept. Can you unpack Banny for us and what it is and what leaders can do about it, how to upskill themselves for that world we live in now?
Yeah, so we used to call it a VUCA world. So BANI now stands for change is coming at us at such a pace that it's becoming brittle, which means that the companies, the environments, and even the people can break at any moment. The A stands for anxious, so there's anxiety all around. That's where the mental health is actually coming in. It's non-linear, which means that change doesn't necessarily have to happen in a straight line. So something that is happening in Kenya can impact South Africans. Wars in a certain area can impact everything around us. A tweet from an international president can have a huge ramification on financial markets. And change is also incomprehensible. So the change doesn't even make sense to us. So some of the skills that leaders now need to do is they need to actually be able to manage stress, manage their mental health, and to actually be able to cope with change, managing their teams throughout change, to buy into change, and to influence them to actually make the changes that are necessary. So people need to learn to really be observant what's going on. So in the past, where you could do a strategic plan for 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, now it has to be much shorter. You need to keep your ear on the market, what's happening, and you need to know where you need to possibly pivot or completely change direction. So this means that people cannot just focus on things that worked in the past. It requires a different types of mindset. And a lot of the work that I've been doing lately in collaboration with other people and in my own practice has been around this new world of work and these future-based skills. So looking at things like curiosity, creativity, dealing with change, looking at all of these types of skills that people need, which are more human skills. So even though people are all very focused on AI, what they're not actually realizing is that they need to use their own brains and their own critical thinking, and they can use AI as a thinking partner, but not outsource it all to AI.
It's very tricky to keep AI out of a conversation nowadays because it's so important. And I recently joked that every year the Time Magazine Person of the Year comes out, I'm holding my breath for when the Person of the Year is AI. While we're on the subject and while we're here, how do you feel that the whole AI revolution is it seems to be inevitable. It's happening anyway. But how do you feel that leaders can equip their people to cope with that? And it's a massive subject, but in a nutshell, what would that mean to you, and how are you guiding leaders through that?
To like I'm saying, not outsource your thinking. So start with brainstorming your own ideas and working on that, and then also asking AI to actually notice things like gaps. So if you're looking at things like critical thinking, we recently did a program, and one of the areas where humans struggle is finding the descending voice. So the descending voice is a voice that's very different than your own. So if you are thinking in a certain way, the algorithm will only feed you that very same thing. All of your friends will probably have the same beliefs as you, which means that you're actually in an echo chamber of just receiving the same confirmation bias all the time. If you're in a business, that can be very tricky because you could actually miss out on huge risks that are out there. So there's a very big thing that I enjoyed about Titan that's showing on Netflix. It was a submarine that went to the Titanic wreckage. I don't know if you watched it.
I remember my
Okay.
cousins raving about this. They're very excited about it, and I just have claustrophobia thinking about going under the water in a submarine to go and dig up the Titanic. But that was the dissenting
So,
voices, eh?
yes. So the CEO of this company actually was in an echo chamber, and he had confirmation bias to say that he wants to take people to the Titanic wreckage, and no matter what the engineers, the maritime engineers, no matter who said to him that this is not possible in this specific way that you want to do it with this type of equipment, he just refused to listen to it. And ultimately, he actually took people, including himself and his son, to their death. And there are lots of examples. There's another story about a shipwreck, about a boat that I recently saw, where again, the captain wanted to show off to his mate that was on the shoreline, and he decided to take the ship very close to this island, which was off the specific route. And bam, went into a rock face, and this boat actually sunk, and people died. And there are so many examples where things have gone wrong in business because people weren't using critical thinking. So it's very important that sometimes using AI, you could actually say, what am I missing out? What are the risks? Is there another viewpoint? So not to say that that is the only way to go about it, but you could actually get other viewpoints or a dissenting voice outside of your echo chamber. And that is one of the ways that I would definitely say that can be very helpful using AI. I've done a course that I also ran at the Global SME Summit in Davos, where we spoke about using AI in an ethical way with your personal brand. And that was really all about how can you repurpose your own content. So if you have media interviews, if you have podcasts, if you are speaking at conferences or events and you get video recordings, how you could use your own content and actually turn that into newsletters for your company, smaller snippets, and a range of things where you're not actually asking AI to give you the content, but you're actually mining your own voice and your own content. And that was one of the ways that I've specifically been teaching my clients to help build their personal brand by actually tapping into the inner gold, what they are doing already.
That is such a valuable thing, Yoka, reminding us how much we actually can do. In the AI debate, I'm cautious because I really value what human beings can do. I really value my own creativity. I value the creativity of others. And it's sad to look at something amazing nowadays and go, she write that herself? It's so hard to just perish that thought, but we have to be aware of it nowadays. And this very ethical way of really leveraging what we do, what we have, and what we have in our own rights, especially those of us who have built up a body of work over a lifetime, over a career. There's so much there already. So it's really important not to underestimate ourselves. So in the context of AI, I fully agree with you that it's so important to put that message out there. And also, as personal brands or as businesses, to have our AI declaration. And the one that I'm using with my clients is we use authentic intelligence. We tap AI for its superpowers, and then we bring in a human. Our ideas begin with people, and we have that interface. But the ultimate result is this authentic intelligence, which goes beyond our human limitations, but it's so much richer and more alive and just more soulful than what AI can do on its own with all its amazing abilities. And it will be interesting to see where that goes in the future.
I want to add
Yes.
something. I was having a coaching session with a client of mine who's in my boardroom speaker program. And we were speaking about the difference between the written word, the spoken word, and an AI tone. And I said to her, if you are writing a presentation or a talk that you're going to do at an event, at a conference, or go on a podcast, use your own voice. Use it in the words that you would use. Because even if you're writing it in a written way, I always say, then record it and listen to it and rewrite it in the way you would actually say it. Because the way I write and the way I speak can be different. Because writing can possibly be a little bit more formal than what our spoken word is like. So make sure that people can actually, hear your unique voice in it. And what I've noticed on myself, Marie, changes I've made. I think I got a little bit obsessed in the repurposing thing originally. And I started noticing that all my content started sounding the same. And I've now gone back to actually listening to the podcast, making notes, and actually then writing the blog in my own hand, not using AI. And then I get a much greater response versus the page mush version, as Tiffany Markman calls it, that comes out if you throw it through AI. So I've started actually seeing that my unique voice sounds very different when I write it myself. And I've noticed the moment, and I teach this to people. If you look at neuroscience, the more you do something, you're actually creating train tracks in your brain, and you're actually creating those connection points. And if you stop doing something, you actually unlearn it. And eventually you actually lose the connections. And I found that I had actually stopped feeling confident in my own writing voice because I'd been using AI so much. And I had to regain the confidence and almost unlearn using certain AI, especially Claude, for certain things and say, where will I use it and where will I not use it so that the unique voice stands out more. So very interesting unlearning that's happening as we are going through this craze. I'm also seeing trends where a lot of people are just using AI design features, and a lot of the content on social media just all looks exactly the same because it's the same design coming through the same AI. So you can actually see where creative designers have done the work versus an AI model. So I'm seeing, you have to go through this process to actually start realizing where real value also lies.
Absolutely. I think it's made everything that a real human makes so much more valuable and resonant, and we're beginning to love our flaws for it. Yoke, this shows
Definitely.
just how versatile you are. And you just mentioned your speaking and the Global SME Summit in Davos, Switzerland. Something else you presented there was your masterclass on how to make a horse thirsty. And this hails back to your sales background, which started when you were 15 years old selling pizza and already seeing what works, what doesn't work. And today, you train people from all walks of life and their leaders in sales, in addition to your leadership and your team's work. You use this how to make a horse thirsty idea to explore the neuroscience of the buying brain. And that's something that speakers complain about all the time. It's something that coaches and other people who sell their services talk about a lot. They get contacted by the agencies or the clients, then they work so hard putting out a heart and soul, beautifully crafted proposal, assuming it wasn't written by AI, right? But so many of us really still put heart and soul into it. And suddenly the client goes quiet. So what is the whole reason behind this? You've got some really powerful tips on what halts the sales process and allows the client to appear like they're ghosting you. Why does it happen, and how do we fix that?
What people don't often understand is there's the customer buyer's journey, and very often while they're contacting you, they could either be really hot in terms of right now there's a conference happening where they need a speaker next week, or they are still comparing things. They don't even have the budget yet. They're simply in research mode, or they're very hot for it. They think they have the budget, they want to buy it, and now they get that proposal from them. And where you maybe had a conversation and all of that, perhaps what they are getting doesn't align to what your conversation was. So very often there could be a misalignment between what you're saying in the meeting versus how you're actually presenting your proposal. Sometimes what people also don't realize is the buyer is going to look at it from their point of view. Is this a fit for me right now with the people that I have specifically? I always joke and say, if you had to use the horse scenario and the client is the horse, why is the horse not going to the water and why is it not drinking? And I say, sometimes they've just had a drink and they're not thirsty. So sometimes people actually have been contacted by a client, they're proposing or they're reaching out to the client, but they've just finished their conference and they're thinking of the next year's conference, but they've just finished their conference. They're not really thirsty yet for the conference for next year. Or it could be dirty or polluted water. So a horse doesn't want to drink that. And in that scenario, they don't see it as a fit with their culture, their brand, or perhaps something is putting them off where they're thinking that you've broken their trust. So maybe it could be something along the lines of you were supposed to meet with them and you didn't communicate well enough, or the PA was supposed to say something and they never got that message across. So somewhere trust might be broken. Sometimes they get distracted. So sometimes they're hot for it, but at that moment a crisis hits, things are happening in their business environment, and you think they're ghosting you. They probably are, because this crisis is now front of mind. So when I'm very often coaching entrepreneurs or salespeople with this sales process, it's about making them realize that you are not the most important thing in their world. And they have so much happening around them. Potentially, they've got memory loss because you only contacted them once, you never followed up. They've lost your details. They saw 5 other companies in the meantime, and they went back to one of them because they were front of mind. So sometimes these could be the reasons why people are ghosting you. I often say to people, because I'm saying it's good to have a little bit of healthy debate. Sometimes you actually need to figure out, is this person still on your pipeline in terms of, is this still something that can potentially happen? Has the timeline shifted? Is it not now, but maybe later? So those are the questions you need to figure out. And sometimes you actually have to contact them and say, whether it's over email, WhatsApp, message, LinkedIn message, you can contact them in various ways until they respond if they're ghosting you, and actually saying, I haven't heard anything back from you in the last 2 weeks. I'm sure that something is going on your side. Can we open up the conversation again? Is there potentially a big crisis going on that I need to be aware of? Should I move out the timeline for the proposal? So actually opening it up and actually asking the person, what is blocking this? will actually allow the person to re-engage and say, yes, I've had a crisis with my family. Yes, actually, they took our budget away. Yes. So instead of assuming that they hate you, they're hiding from you, they never want to do business with you, just literally opening it up and addressing the elephant in the room can sometimes open that conversation again and make you readjust it and actually see. Sometimes what people do with their CRM is they actually put probability. So if you thought it was a really high probability, there's usually different percentages that you might put towards where is this prospect in the pipeline. What I learned when I was in corporate sales, we were always starting at 10% because it's not no yet. And then you would go up in increments. So you would go, if you've contacted them, it would maybe be 20%. If you've met with them, 40%. If you've now done a proposal, 50%. If they've confirmed the proposal, would go up to 80%, 90% would be PO received, 100% would be money in the bank. And I think what often happens, so everyone has different ways of looking at their pipeline and looking at this, is very often, whether it's entrepreneurs, speakers, salesperson, you think the probability is high and now they ghost you, which means that probably something has happened and possibly the month will have to be adjusted. Maybe it's only something for next year. Maybe it will have to go down to 10%. So it's about looking at it. Has it completely shifted the probability of this? And it's worthwhile in picking up the phone or trying to open it up so that you can know if you need to actually remove it from the pipeline, because otherwise you're almost like feeling emotionally invested and rejected, while if you're just seeing it as something that is not happening right now and you actually put a reminder for yourself to contact them again in 6 months' time or whatever it might be, then you won't have that same emotional reaction.
That is this emotional intelligence, EQ, part of the equation, isn't it? And it's a bit of your Kintsugi gold again, because when you're ghosted by a prospect or you don't hear from them, that is a bit of a fracture. And whose responsibility is it to go and mend that? But instead of getting upset about it, actually being prepared for it, having the processes, even the templates or the scripts in place that we can go and follow up there really makes a difference. And you mentioned the value of CRM, or for the uninitiated, a customer relationship management system. You have done this very scientifically in your own corporate sales experience at Oxford, Pearson Publishers, Entrepreneur Magazine, and even when you've trained teams for Auto Trader and beyond. Now, why does a salesperson or an entrepreneur who sells their own services need to keep track of their numbers? And are these things still important?
So much, so much. There's stats that actually shows that most salespeople will only follow up once or twice with a sales deal, where 80% of business happens at 5+ connects, which means that most people, if you're looking at the stats, are actually losing out on 80% of the business because they're not actually following up enough. And that might not mean that it's within a month, it could be over a year, which means that some buyers' journeys could take a long time and some could take a quick time. But if you're not actually putting reminders in place for yourself to how often you want to follow up with these people, and actually I say to salespeople, you need to almost hold the hand of the client so they can follow that sales process and easily buy from you. They're so much in their own world. Their world is rocking them and shaking them. If you're not actually going to hold their hand and make it easy for them to buy, you will probably not get the sale. So that's really where the CRM can really help you. And doesn't have to be an official CRM, even an Excel sheet and putting reminders in your own calendar does a job as well. That I had a colleague when I was at Entrepreneur Magazine, and he had one of the biggest portfolios, which was all of the core brands for advertising. I remember once that he didn't actually update. So this is more like your target sheet, where you're actually looking at how far am I off in terms of achieving my target. So what is confirmed orders, all of that. And he missed out on a quarterly bonus with something like 100 rand, which would have been like maybe 20 to 30K in his pocket, because he wasn't actually making sure that he had the exact correct amounts in his sheet. He could have just closed something small and it would have been fine. So very often what salespeople do is they'll say, I want to have the meetings, I want to have the fun, I'll do the selling, but I don't want to do my own admin. And in the same way as in a business, if you're not aware of your own numbers, that's where sales will come knocking, and that's where fraud might happen if other people are doing your books and you're not aware of it. So you always need to be aware of what are the actual amounts that's in the pipeline, but also what's confirmed, and even for you as an entrepreneur, cash flow. What is paid? And am I invoicing at the right time in order to get the money in? Because some companies only pay on certain dates, certain times of the month. So if you don't have those notes, even in your own CRM, you will be missing out on getting paid on time. It will affect your cash flow.
Absolutely. It's really, really important, because for an entrepreneur, unlike a salesperson who has other people to account for, nobody's going to force you to do your paperwork. I'm often surprised when I hear of entrepreneurs who lose track of their finances and realize 2 months later that they haven't invoiced. And now they have a cash flow crunch, and the client no longer has it in their budget, and all kinds of things can happen. So it's so important. But you've got some really good strategies for getting back to a client who has gone quiet. You've got a couple of scripts and ideas, and these are genius, Yoke. Would you like to share some of your little tidbits of how to rekindle the conversation when someone has gone quiet, also to help you decide, is this one that I keep for later, or is this a no for now?
Sure. So I would definitely say go ask over email, the phone, message, stalk them, WhatsApp, and say something like, I haven't heard back from you in a while. There must be something that's stopping us from going forward with this deal. What isn't working for you right now? So what this does, immediately you're addressing the elephant in the room and you're getting the objection out, and you can actually do something about it. You can say something like, it seems that something is bothering you right now. How can we change this? How can we resolve this? Another one that I've often used is there anything else stopping us right now from signing the contract today? And what you're doing is you're actually instructing the brain to give you that Google search and come up with a solution, or say, what will be the fix for this? What will allow us to continue doing business or roll out the program in the next month? So it's really about asking for the solution and unearthing that objection so you can actually do something about it.
So valuable. And from my point of view, sales is not what I teach people to do, but obviously there's a role for anybody who's in a business position or in a persuasive position where those elements must come in. And for me, that point, if we know now is not the time, now we can allow it to go, but not forever. It is important to sustain that relationship and make sure that we're still taking care of those people. It might not be a service that we're offering, but still be sure that they get a message from you now and again when you see something that could be of value to them, that you still remember important occasions for them, especially when you could do something for them that's not a sale at all. Because when you approach them without expecting anything and without pushing them, they remember you, they remember that you're valuable, and when the time comes, they can then come back to you. But there's no reason to ghost them back. That's a great way to lose them forever.
I love what you're saying. It's almost like making notes about birthdays, what's important for them. So I always think of the old days when we used to go to the doctor and they had a physical file. I don't know if you remember that. And what they did there was they would literally like write down you stumped your toe. So they would put your whole like medical research in there. And these days it's all done digitally. But they're looking at that file and immediately you feel loved because they remember you've had sinus issues, this happened, oh, that time when you went abroad and you picked up that virus. So they have like your history and they know what you're about. So we need to do the same thing with our clients to almost like keep their file updated, and it will make them feel loved and that you care. So if they're speaking about specific things, actually updating that in the notes so you can bring it up again actually shows people that you've listened to them.
Doctor comparison is so important because this is as important as a medical history is if you really want to sustain the relationship. Because there's something else there, and that's sometimes this is not actually the client. But if this client knows you and trusts you and has come to love you, you may well be the person they refer for something far bigger. But now you also speak about something that you call strategic positioning versus generic pitching. And this is a central theme in your strategic selling framework. And that is shifting, especially sales teams or people who sell themselves, from reactive pitch people into a trusted strategic advisor. Why is that discovery phase so important, especially in a high ticket sale? And the traps that people might make that keep them at that transactional pitch or lower ticket instead. And I also want to say, this is if you're not a plumber. There are moments I think I wish I was a plumber because every weekend, right? It's like they're super in demand and nobody's going to say, oh, well, I'll do it later because they have, that horse is thirsty, right? You need a plumber, you need a plumber. No negotiation. But for services, it's more subtle. So tell us about strategic positioning and this advisor role.
It's actually funny because I remember learning about this many years ago when I was at Pearson Publishers, and one of our clients was the correctional services, and we provided FET textbooks to them. So it was actually for the inmates, it was in line with high school, but FET is slightly different than normal high school. It would be more things like engineering, plumbing, it's actually courses that tradesmen could do. And I remember our instructor at Pearson saying to us, it's important to not only focus on something specifically that you want to sell to them, but you actually need to ask them about, about their bigger business goals. You need to actually ask them about their facilities. So actually look around you and really get to know the customer. And I took this very seriously, Marie. So I saw the client at this correctional services and I said, oh, this is so interesting. So where are you using these textbooks? And they offered to give me a tour and I wasn't really thinking about it. So the next moment I'm touring the correctional services in Pretoria, which is a male-only prison. But what I ended up doing, providing value, which was quite profound, is I offered to give them curriculum training based on our textbooks as a value add. So I actually got to engage with the teachers in that environment. So what I've seen, if you become a strategic advisor, you're not only looking at, I'm trying to sell this advertising or this book, you're actually looking at it, how can it be used? What are the bigger problems in the business? And can you actually align into their strategy or their bigger challenges? So what you find with people that are doing transactional work is they would only focus on this small little thing that they want to sell right now, but they're not really digging quite deeply into understanding the customer, understanding the real pain points, even understanding their goals, their individual goals, and how this product that you're trying to sell, is it even a fit? Could there actually be a journey or something else? Are you just trying to force feed chicken down their throat because you really need the sale? Or do you really want to be an advisor for them where you could actually say, I'm thinking this could work, but potentially you should also look at those areas and using those people. And then people really start trusting you because you're not only in it for yourself. So that's what I saw when I was in the advertising space, one of the ad agencies. We would give them training, but really try to understand what is the strategy of the client, what are they trying to achieve, what are their roadblocks as an agency. And they would then contact me and say, Yoko, what else would you suggest? So besides this magazine that you're working at, and I would actually give them suggestions, in terms of trade shows, different things that they could do that would really help that client. And they saw me much more as a strategic advisor, just trying to force this one little thing down their throat. And I ended up actually selling bigger contracts to them because I saw that I was really trying to align to their pain points. And that's the whole thing with sales. You're not selling a product, you're working with something that is painful for people, so people want to move away from something, or they're moving towards a goal. And if you can, in the discovery process, figure out what that is, and then see if there is something you can suggest or propose based on that, that is where you will get a bigger piece of the pie, versus just force feeding what it is, coming with your own ideas and saying, it's only this keynote is what I want to sell. Maybe that doesn't actually fit the client. Maybe you need to actually customize something for them based on their needs and use input from various ranges of products that you have, and even collaborate with someone so you can actually give them what they really need.
There's something there about surrendering and just being willing to listen to what people really want, having that empathy. Yoki, you have such a wealth of wisdom around selling. But when we zoom out, selling is a very specific kind of persuasion, and you have an incredible Power of Persuasion presentation bootcamp. And this one is known for leaving audiences with tools they can apply immediately on Monday morning. You use neurolinguistic programming, or NLP, and behavioral frameworks, and share that with your people. What is one technique that speakers and coaches and facilitators can use to make their key business ideas sticky so clients remember and act on their pitch long after the meeting ends?
John Medina taught me something in a book many years ago, and when I was in sales training, be very frustrated because people would come back to me all the time, and I would have given the training and I'll think like, how can you possibly forget what I've just trained you 5 minutes ago or like a week ago? And those were the days before I knew about the forgetting curve, which actually shows that within something like 60 days, most people without application would almost forget anything that they just heard. And I went on a mission to actually see how can I create more stickiness so the training can stick, so I don't feel that my work is a waste of time. And what he said is he had an illustration where he showed you if you're taking your audience on a high and a low in terms of emotions, and almost like on a roller coaster ride, where you're making them feel a sense of anticipation, satisfaction, joy, and then despair, hatred, anger, like various things, it actually releases dopamine in their brain, which actually accesses the memory center in their brain. And what I started doing is actually sharing some of these embarrassing stories of mine, and I'll quickly show one with illustrations.
We'll see if this sticks.
So in 2009, I went and I did the auto hiking trial, and I was quite excited about it until we got to day 4. So day 4 is where you have to get up very early in the morning, and you actually have to hike 10 kilometers to get to the Storms River crossing. You needed to actually ascertain what is the water level going to be like. Is it going to be, you need to go through that place with low tide. Okay, so we had to get up at 4 or something ridiculous, and we were hiking, and I knew that we still have this really long day ahead of us. And as we're hiking on this straight little path, I said to myself in my head, the worst thing that can happen right now is I could sprain my ankle. And guess what happened? So we're 2 kilometers in on the 10 kilometers to go through to the Storms River. everyone needs to now carry my backpack because I know I have like an injured ankle. And many years later, when I studied NLP, and I learned that our brains cannot hear the word not, and if we even say something to ourselves in our brain, we create a picture of us doing it. And what I was doing was I was focusing on what I don't want, not on what I want. I said to myself, the worst thing that can possibly happen, where what I should have said was reframe it and said, my ankles are not feeling as strong right now. I'm not feeling as confident on this route. I'm not feeling as energetic as I want to feel. And it would have actually empowered me and lifted my mood. So what I did after this, after studying NLP, I started actually changing my thoughts, and I was hiking in the Drakensberg, going up a mountain, and I kept on saying to myself, so it's like quite steep, and we're going up, backpacks, we're sleeping up there, and I kept on saying to myself, you have strong feet, you can do this. I was actually focusing on the downhill in the uphill. So what you would notice as the path is curving upwards, it obviously goes up and down, but I was just looking at the little bits of downhill and going up. And one of my friends said to me, Yoke, I don't know what you were doing, but you were like sprinting up that mountain. And he said, I think you were NLPing yourself. And I felt so confident and strong. And my feet were fine. So when you actually do that, when I'm teaching people the principle in the Power of Persuasion bootcamp, that if you're doing public speaking, you need to reframe your thoughts into the positive, and then you can put not in front of it. So instead of saying, I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling overwhelmed, or this is going to go badly, or I'm scared that I might go red in my face, you turn it into what you want, and you're saying, I'm not feeling so calm right now. I'm not feeling as confident as I want to be. And even just in your own thoughts, your mind will actually give you that confidence, that calm, because that's a picture that you're giving it. And that's one of the stickiness principles that I've taught people to weave storytelling into their speaking and presenting, and take people on a high and a low and make them feel it, and then tie that story to your core message. And that is how you create stickiness. So the funny thing is, the proof is in the pudding. Many years later, ever since I started doing that at Auto Trader, that was in 2018, 2019. No, earlier, 2016. People still come to me now, 10 years later, and they say that was the best sales training they ever had, and they still remember everything that I taught them, and they bring up a specific story or a specific metaphor. And that's really what it's about. So when you start applying it, especially embarrassing stories, people will remember the story and they will remember the lesson.
That embarrassment is because of the emotional intensity, right? And that dopamine rush it causes. That is solid gold. Yoke, I want to ask you quickly. In an environment where we have other professionals around us, we might be having a sense of competition. I want to outsell another salesperson. I want to outspeak another speaker. I want a more successful coaching business. I want the goodies and the accolades and the awards. You say competing and thinking about, me first is not the best approach. What do you advocate?
I don't call it competing, but I would say it is about positioning yourself and trying to see how would I compare against this other person? What is my unique selling point? What are they really doing well? Is there anything I could model, perhaps? But what is it that I am really good at, and actually zoning in on that when you're offering that to the client? So it's not about bringing the competitor down, but actually realizing that you are bringing a product that has unique features and purpose and value in it that is different than others, and it is by design. and you're actually zoning in on that when you're selling.
Absolutely brilliant. And you speak of an abundance mindset as a whole shift in all of this. Can you tell us more about that?
Definitely. I believe the pie is big enough, and there's an example that I actually bring up in my How to Make the Horse Fuzzy talk that I'll quickly share. It's the art of reciprocity, is where if you are treating someone well and you actually giving them a gift, it can actually have a positive knock-on effect for you. So for instance, if I'm engaging with your social media content, possibly you will feel that you want to engage with mine. But in the same way, if you're taking someone for lunch, psychologically, they would possibly feel that they want to give you something back. It might not be a sales deal, but it could be an introduction. It could lead to a lot of different things. So the Stanley Cup example is a prime example for me. There was a lady, and she had a very bad accident, and her car was actually got on fire on a highway in America. And the next day she went to the scrapyard to look at the car, and there she noticed that, so she's making like this little TikTok reel and says, I'm here at the scrapyard after my car caught on fire, there's a video of the car, and she says, but look at this, here's my Stanley Cup, and it's fine, and there's still ice in it, and she shakes it. And the Stanley Cup is not burnt up, the whole car's burnt up. So she posts this, and this is a little gift that she gives. So that is like social proof, saying to Stanley, wow, thank you so much for having such an amazing product. This actually made my day. My car's burned up, but look at the Stanley Cup. So she is actually giving a little gift to Stanley, because immediately everyone starts going crazy and this video starts going viral. People now start tagging Stanley and actually saying to Stanley, why don't you give her, another Stanley Cup? Or, they were like, she's kind to you, maybe you should be kind back. They're not saying that, but kind of hinting. And suddenly the CEO of Stanley inboxes her and says, we're so sorry to hear about your car. We would love to gift you, I think, like something like 5 Stanley Cups. Please give us your address. The next thing, she posts a video talking about the fact that Stanley has given her these cups and it means so much. And so now, she's given them a gift. They've literally given her a gift. Now she's making another video about it. So it's that whole act of reciprocity. The next moment, people see this video that she's made and they say, Stanley, why don't you give her a car? The next thing, Stanley responds, and the CEO sends a video and says, we would love to replace your car. And then after this, she actually did a video where she's there with the cup at the car, thanking Stanley. And when you actually look at the stats, for you, Marie, that love marketing, there was 140 million views of that video. If they had to spend $10 per 1,000 views, a campaign would have cost them $1.4 million. And the price of the car was $50,000. So if you're thinking of a return investment, literally on spend and reciprocity, both brands really benefited from it. So I feel like sometimes if we actually look at things from an abundance mindset and you are collaborating with people, you are, like we're doing this podcast together, you're engaging with people's posts, if you really think their work is worthwhile and you know a client that needs it, you can send it on to them or send it in via LinkedIn. Or if someone writes a beautiful article and you know that your client would benefit from it, send it to them. That's all the art of reciprocity and making that pie bigger and actually realizing that you are becoming more of a strategic advisor because you're not just punting your own things. You're actually caring about your clients and sending them things that can help them. And you are staying front of mind so that when they need you, they will phone you and use you.
The reason why I'm looking down is because I need to share something about you and your incredible generosity, which I just need to find quickly because you really demonstrate this and you embody this. So recently, Jacques de Villiers shared an article where he spoke about the value of belonging to a community of speakers, and the one that we share is the PSASA, the Professional Speakers Association of Southern Africa. And what Jacques wrote in this article, he wrote very much about the value of this community, but what he said about you was this. If you're connected to PSASA members on LinkedIn, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about and who I'm talking about. Yoke van Dam seems to be everywhere. She's liking people's posts, leaving thoughtful comments, sharing other people's work, and quietly championing them without asking for anything in return. She has this wonderful habit of talking other people up. That's just her makeup. My first thought was that if PSASA ever created a most helpful member award, Yoke would be very hard to beat. But what he says there is that that would be making a mistake because it's not about the expectation. It's not about the recognition. It's really about that generosity that's heartfelt and real, that doesn't expect anything in return. And I think that's the magic part of this formula. This abundance mindset works when you're not expecting anything in return, and you never know where it comes back from. And Yoke, I really want to applaud and recognize and thank you for sharing your abundance mindset so generously in your community, for the great work you do as the Kintsugi Queen. Before we go, I have two questions. The last one is, where do we find you? But the second last one is there a question you would love to answer that I haven't asked yet?
What a question to throw in right at the end. Where can you find me? y-connect.biz. And I think we'll link the various social links from our link tree in the show notes, right, Marie? Maybe, like who are some of my role models who has really inspired me?
So, Yoke,
I recently reread The Choice of Dr. Edith Eger, and she actually passed away this year, which is so sad. What I found when I read it again, I think it was now maybe the third time, is suddenly other things jumped out of the page to me, which really spoke to me. So in the beginning of the book, she actually speaks about her Holocaust journey. So she was 16 years old when her and her family were taken to Auschwitz, and her mother and father almost immediately were taken to the gas chambers. And her sister actually went through this whole journey together and did death marches, and they really supported each other to really stay alive and survive. And I think what was very interesting for me is she then went to the States. So after this section in the book, then goes into sometimes if you go through trauma, not speaking about it is not helping you and everyone else. Sometimes you actually need to address it. But she wasn't ready. So for many years when she married and had kids, she would never speak about what happened to her. And quite a while later, she went and studied psychology. And a young student, because she was much older by then, asked her if she was a Holocaust survivor. And he gave her the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And she was so inspired by Viktor Frankl because they both went through Auschwitz with some similar coping techniques. Her coping technique was thinking, if I survive today, if I can just get through today, then I can see tomorrow. And what she also did is when she was forced to dance for Mengele, this horrible guy, and ordered so many people's deaths because she was a ballet dancer. She would visualize herself actually dancing on the Blue Danube waltz in Austria or Budapest on the stage in an opera house. So she actually transported herself out of this really negative environment into a much better space. And that is what allowed her to cope with those very hectic moments where Viktor Frankl said he kept on thinking that he's going to see his wife again, and that gave him hope. And he visualized himself because I think he was already a psychiatrist going into Auschwitz. So what he did was he visualized himself in Vienna speaking to audiences about what is the difference between people that were able to survive these death camps versus those that went into depression and died from illness or committed suicide. So it actually showed a different mindset and a willingness to live. And he would imagine himself doing those talks. And she actually found such value that much later on, when she studied psychology, he actually became a great friend and mentor for her. I found a lot of value then reading about how she then, after she got her doctorate, was then doing work with veterans out of war that was suffering from PTSD because she had first-hand experience. And sometimes she would see two patients who had both lost the ability of their legs, they're in wheelchairs, and the one would be, rocking himself, and he would be in the fetal position, really depressed, not willing to speak to anyone. And then the other guy would say to her, "Wow, I'm so happy to be alive. I'm much closer to my grandkids right now. I can get into the sun. I can actually see the sun's reflection on their eyes." And I just realized when I was reading that very often we actually jail ourselves and choose to see ourselves as the victim, but we could also make another choice. So many examples. I would definitely say people need to read a book at least 3 times because you will learn so many lessons, and especially when you also read about the patients she treated, the therapies, and learning that art of forgiveness, where sometimes you need to forgive the people that hurt you or did wrong things against you, but you sometimes need to forgive yourself as well and release that older version of yourself that maybe wasn't willing to make the learning yet or that wasn't mature enough. And for me, I think her voice brought a lot of hope, learning, and inspiration.
Wow. Now, aren't you glad I asked you that question?
So much.
Wow. And we'll include a link to The Choice by Edith
Eager.
Eger, right, as well in our description. Yoke van Dam, the Kintsugi Queen, thank you so very much for joining us on the League of Visionaries podcast. And I can't wait to see where your visionary message takes you next and what it brings to the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marie.